I want to just chat about the fact that this book is such a reference guide, because you talked about how you don't have to sit down and read it cover to cover.
You don't. That's the amazing part about it. And caregiving is not a linear experience. So, things can be one way one day and completely different tomorrow. So I structured the book with you in mind, with your family in mind. And I wanted it to be relatable. I wanted you to be able to see yourself in the book and your family in the book. So there's a lot of stories in there, not only my personal stories, but stories of hundreds of people that I've worked with professionally, to give you that sense of comfort and sense of knowledge to go, wow, that happened yesterday. My mom asked me that question just yesterday. And the light bulb goes off.
Perfect. So let's start with your mom and what happened that night, and how you hope that story will help other people.
Well, that evening, it was horrific. And as we arrived in the emergency room, I realized that we weren't going to get in to see the doctor right away. And I'm thinking, we have to get in. She needs help right now. I'm going to lose her. And tears were running down her face. They were running down my face. And I was trying to be strong. And, you want to just start screaming at people. But the ER was littered with people. And just because you couldn't physically see what was going on with her didn't mean she didn't need immediate attention. We almost lost her.
So what could you do ahead of time, and what kinds of things do you tell people to do ahead of time?
Well, what I didn't realize was that the ER was full, and they were going into diversion, and you wouldn't think about that. And really what hospitals do is, as they're getting full and they're getting to capacity, they start to divert ambulances and patients to other hospitals that have the ability to take on the work. And I just didn't know that. So a call in advance could have been the difference between life and death that night.
Talk to me about other things in the book that you really do think are the difference between life and death for families.
Well, there's those moments where you realize this is really serious. I didn't think this was that big of a deal. I'll just give you a little example. One, my mom was in the hospital, like she was so many times, and the charge nurse said to me, she has a bladder infection. And I thought, well, yeah, so big deal, just give her some Cipro, it's not that big of a deal. And she pulled me aside and said, no, Kelley, this is a big deal. She's a really sick person. This is an infection in her body. This could kill her. You know what, I didn't realize it. I'd never thought of it that way. And really, why would you? I mean, the body's an amazing machine, but it's also a very complex machine. And, we rely on professionals to give us that guidance.
And the whole point of the book really is to give people a heads up, right? When they're dealing with these issues with their parents.
So the book really offers you quick and easy advice, things you may not have thought of. It's like the one thing that if you would have just done this, it could have made all the difference in the world.
Let's talk about the other big point in the book and how you wrote it and how you constructed it, and that is going off of the work you've done with over 1,000 families and how you really wanted to put in a lot of relatable advice for people. How did you end up working with over 1,000 families?
So as I was helping my mom with just getting settled in her own life and trying to figure out how we were going to support her, not only financially, but just support her in general with her healthcare needs, I just realized that there might be a way for me to pursue this professionally as well. And I remember one day we were at chemo, and there was a man sitting next to my mom, and we had this little routine that we did. And I would go over to her and say, okay, Mom, bear hug. And I'd grab her around her waist, and then I'd hoist her up and get her situated in her walker, and off we'd go. And there was a man sitting next to her, and he said, I wish I had someone to help me like that. And I was like, wow, I think I can do this. I think, there's so many people who are in need of this kind of help and support. And that's really what led me to in-home care. And through that process, over the last 11 years, I've served over 1,000 families. And that information and those stories are in the book to help you and your family with the challenges that you're facing as your parents age.
So let's talk about the dementia portion and your father.
So in the book, we go through a number of different scenarios, but I wanted to shine a light on one of the chapters in particular, and it's called What Happens When Dementia Strikes. And in this chapter, I really take a deep dive into what happened with my own dad. And someone who was highly intelligent, very capable, extremely athletic, just literally went off a cliff. And how do you handle that? How do you try to interact with someone who is highly intelligent and now has lost all of their professional life? They don't have any recollection. They don't have any recollection of their professional life. They've gone back to being in college. It's a pretty scary thing. And how do you meet people where they are? It's super important. You know, they're no longer the person that raised you. They're no longer that professional basketball coach or professional orthodontist or, you know, whatever roles they played in society. Those things are lost. So you really need to start accepting them for who they are today and what they can offer. When it comes to dementia, dementia is the syndrome. And so many people think Alzheimer's equals dementia, and it does not. So what we've done in the book is put together some step-by-step tips for you that you can follow along with to help guide you. One of the great examples in there is get your I'm sorries down, because people want to be heard. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Dad. I know I was speaking to you like a child. I didn't mean it. Because one of the things that happened when my dad was in memory care was they were talking to him like he was an uneducated individual. And I had to pull the nurse aside and said, he's not uneducated. He's highly intelligent, but he has dementia. So there's a difference. And you often hear people doing the baby talk thing with people that have dementia. It doesn't fly. I don't know about you, but I don't want someone speaking to me in baby talk. So there's just little...
And they are still aware.
Mm-hmm. They are still aware. They have that awareness.
Yeah, just because you have dementia does not mean you aren't aware of things, correct?
Well, and the other thing about dementia is they may not remember your name, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
And isn't that the most important thing with a loved one? Mm-hmm. Because you just want them to feel okay. Mm-hmm. Whatever their new reality is, you just don't want to draw attention and make them feel bad.
Right.
Because you love them. You know, I did that with my dad too. I could tell he was he had Parkinson's, I don't know if you recall, but there's an element of dementia with that, for sure.
Yes.
And he would be talking about a scenario or a storyline, and I knew it was all wrong. I didn't draw attention to it and say, Dad, no, that wasn't last week. Remember, that was last year. Instead, I would just say, yeah, I remember that too.
Yeah.
You know, because I didn't want to make him feel bad. And what would be the point?
What is the point
Of drawing attention to the fact that he got that wrong? Didn't matter. Because then we had a wonderful conversation and all we were doing was talking about what we wanted to talk about. Rather than, because he was aware that he was getting stuff wrong. And how horrible to sit and speak with your daughter, be embarrassed, and know you're scaring the hell out of her because you can't remember things.
Yeah.
You know, so I understand that so well. So dementia we talked about, but let's talk about another issue in the book that you tackle, which is hospice.
Yeah, and this was one that was challenging for our family. I remember the day that I called my mom's primary care physician and said, I really think we need to have hospice support. And one of the things that people don't realize is that you can be on hospice and off of hospice. There are people that are on hospice and then they go off of it. And for my mom, it was a death sentence. Like, how could you even suggest that? I'm not dying. And there was a lot of denial there. But I knew that we couldn't continue to go to the hospital every other day. And hospice provides physicians and nurses and staffing that come to the patient's home. And we needed that. We needed that support.
So in the book, in the hospice chapter, as a reader, what am I going to get?
In the hospice chapter, you'll get a breakdown of when to engage hospice. And even talking to your physician about it. You know, that's a great place to start. You know, when do we do this? When do we start to think about it? So the book goes through my personal experience, but I think you'll find it really relatable and really helpful.
And it's really a how-to, isn't it?
It is. And I think that there are so many situations that we find ourselves in, and we end up just running down the rabbit hole. So this book brings you back to reality and points out things that you should be thinking about along the way, steps along the way that you can take in advance before your back's against the wall, before you're trying to make decisions in an urgent situation. Because I don't know about you, but I don't make very good decisions under fire.
Well, and the subject matter we're talking about is heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
We're talking about taking care of our aging parents, and our hearts are in that more than our heads ever. So that's, this is almost a tool to put your head in the game before your heart takes over, right?
Absolutely.
Something like that?
I think that's a great way to put it, because then that's exactly what happens is your heart takes over. And if your head takes over, you end up fire hosing people or just trying to bulldoze your way through it, and that doesn't serve anyone well.